Salutations, ladies and doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene, talk, and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone. I was previously very tired, and now I'm just smirking perpetually.
And I'm your host, last time Lord Wannabe, the brains of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
Again, I went from very, very tired to smirking knowingly, and that's a pretty good turnaround.
Okay. So it's I'm fairly certain it's gonna be a short one, just given that we kind of a slow week, for honesty.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a article that we've had in the works of covering, but we just haven't had the chance. It's originally written in Norwegian. I'm not going to pull it up because my computer, being as old as it is, unfortunately does not translate it. So I will be reading from my phone on it. So yeah.
And yes, DT, when you get here, it is probably the article you're thinking of.
Did he send it to you?
No, the main thrust of the article is about a YouTuber that we both like, and he covered it on his channel because, if they're gonna make hit pieces about you, you're gonna at least try to, monetize them and so on.
All right. Okay. So the title of it is, well, it's originally from gamer.no. Title is Epstein, Culture War, and the Eternal Gamergate. The subheader is the culture war that has ravaged the internet worldwide must be seen in a whole new light.
When I originally found this, I didn't think it could ever rise to the level of the Rewriting Ripley article that was our white whale for the longest time. But it does remind me heavily of the Rewriting Ripley article. It's that same level of like conspiratorial woo-woo thinking.
Oh, before we continue, this is written by Andreas Bjornbeck. I say the name wrong, I apologize. And it was published April 9th, 2026. So yes, we are about a month or so.
To be fair, I sent it when it was relatively fresh. We just, didn't get around to it because life happened.
Yeah. Okay, just give me 1 sec. All right. On Wednesday, March 4th, 2026, the White House released a video on social media platforms such as TikTok, X, and Instagram. It begins by showing in first person a soldier in a desert area pulling out a table-like object. After a few taps on the screen, the soldier calls in a missile strike on the enemy. The average American probably won't know exactly where the clip is from, but most people probably notice that it doesn't look entirely real. The video we're watching is from the Call of Duty Modern Warfare series, a game series that often takes place in the Middle East, and was originally inspired by the Iraq War. In the gaming industry, Modern Warfare is as synonymous with post 9/11 America as the Batman film Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is in the film industry.
Was Dark Knight supposed to be some 9/11 riff? I didn't like. Obviously, it was set during then because, well, that's when the movie was made and came out. But I didn't really get much of a 9/11.
Well, look at the
vibe.
Joker's. Look at the Joker's tactics.
Yeah, obviously the Joker's a terrorist, but you could have done the Joker as a terrorist without any deference towards.
I think it's like that whole. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's like one of those times that when a bunch of movies come out at that time regarding post that event, and people start
Yeah,
making predictions and stuff, and
if if it was meant to be, as in, if Christopher Nolan deliberately inserted that into the movie, then I stand corrected. But as much as I am loath to say this, and don't worry, I will be rescinding this later, I will give the tiniest fraction of credit to Christopher Nolan in that if he meant The Dark Knight to be a riff on 9/11, he was much more subtle and nuanced about it than a lot of the movies that came out during that period. By far, one of the worst offenders is the Steven Spielberg fucking War of the Worlds. Gods that hammered the 9/11 in so fucking hard. But anyway, so if Christopher Nolan did intend that, then credit to him. Again, I will be rescinding this credit later. Don't get used to having it, Christy boy. I'm gonna take it away from you in a minute. But um, credit to him for being more nuanced about it than a lot of people were at the time. And if it wasn't an intentional thing, and this is just the author projecting, then fuck your projection. But this is one of those times where themes being secondary or tertiary rather than central is kind of beneficial to everyone. Anyway, moving on.
uh, but then something happens. The video immediately cuts to real world footage of rockets blowing up in various cars, planes, and artillery. Visual effects suddenly appear on the screen as the targets are blown up. We see 100 plus in yellow lettering, a sign identical to the score markers that appear in Call of Duty. The video's caption says, "On behalf of the red, white, and blue."
So, in other words, someone in the governmental administration shared a meme, and you're now going to, by by way of conspiratorial academic quasi like dissertation woo woo, going to make a whole ass narrative based on the fact that someone in the governmental administration of the U.S. shared a meme. Like I said, this reminds me a lot of the rewriting Ripley article from a couple of years ago that was a white whale for the longest time. Moving on.
Most people might not recognize the Call of Duty clip at first, even more won't understand what 100 plus refers to. This post is intended for a specific target group, a target group the White House believes will enjoy seeing real acts of war, both trivialized and celebrated through games they themselves have experience with.
You do realize that, like, uh, for the most part, again, asterisks here, but for the most part, memes are useful and good because they're very. A good meme is very nearly universal and can work in multiple contexts, my dudes. Like, yes, obviously, what the White House is trying to go for is the hoorah, America, fuck yeah, patriotism type syndrome. But I get the feeling you're about to try this something, something, something Gamergate. And while that is true that many of the survivors of Gamergate, probably would be susceptible to such memery and praise keck and so on, um, they're far from the only varieties of patriots that like that juxtaposition. As you say, um, Call of Duty is probably the most like dude bro normie ass video game in the history of the medium. So using that as a meme to tongue in cheekily, you know, um, big up populist patriotism is not some conspiratorial, dog whistling. It's useful because again, the best memes are very simple and can work in multiple contexts and are adaptable to various situations. And when you're looking for a meme and your meme is centered on something from popular culture, you're better off picking something that as many people as possible have seen so that it can act as the cultural touchstone and thus make the meme work. Moving on.
Okay. Clip can be interpreted as if reality is a game for the President of the United States. Real acts of war are treated as so solemnly as animated pixels on a screen. Earlier that day, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth utters the words death and destruction from the sky all day long in a speech about how Iran is being relentlessly bombed by by the American Israeli coalition. Next day, the White House publishes an image from the new Pokemon game, po-
Pocopia.
Pokopia, a colorful and child-friendly game where the goal is to save nature and create a cozy and peaceful village full of Pokemon friends. Above the image, the White House has written "Make America Great Again" in the game's own font graphics.
So someone who works for the um, administration is a little bit pop culture savvy and able to, have fun while doing their job. J'accuse. See, this is the thing. This pompous, normative, institutional decorum mongering is utterly insufferable. It's like every politician on the face of the earth has been replaced with Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'm glad there are politicians that can make light of these things. It is far more gratifying to be able to make light of these things and actually please their audience by being in on the joke rather than being some sort of fucking boomer elder statesman who doesn't know what a joke is and wouldn't know it if a joke slapped them upside the face. You're going to make a how dare they be flippant about this very serious thing argument and basically pulled the decorum argument. And I don't think I'm alone when I say this. Fuck your decorum. The Overton window needs to shift, and it needs to shift away from soulless, um, soulless self-seriousness and towards being able to be human about these things. I again don't think I don't think I'm in the minority when I say a lot of us are really, really fucking sick of politicians that can do retardedly stupid things, but because they play the decorum game and the normative institutional game, suddenly everything they do is fine, and no one can ever have an organic reaction to fucking anything.
Hey, Don.
Yeah. Moving on.
Just 6 days earlier, the Trump administration bombed a girls' school during the initial U.S. Israeli attack on Iran. That was back in April, just so everyone's aware. An estimated 168 people were killed in the attack. The majority were young children between the ages of 7 and 12. The vast majority were girls.
And I don't want to be a dick here, and I don't want to bring far too much real world politics into this, because of course it is a pop culture channel that we're on. But the reason why that happened is because terrorists in Iran like using children as human shields because they know that in general, the West more generally and America in particular will sometimes avoid bombing their asses if they use enough children or women as human shields. And I'm sorry, but that is exploiting a weakness. And while obviously the loss of life is bad and, is regrettable, and we would be much better off if they didn't use women and children as human shields, the fact is that they do use women and children as human shields, and not being willing to hit the button anyway is the very weakness that they're exploiting there. So, on the one hand, yes, it's shitty that um, women and children had to die, but if you're looking for the person responsible for that stupidity, that evil, self destructive, and destructive in general stupidity, it's the people who decided to use them as human shields in the first place, you cunt. I.e., it's not bad for the Trump administration to bomb the place that they know terrorists are hiding using people as human shields. It's bad for the terrorists to use them as human shields in the fucking first place. Stop blaming the administration for things the enemy is doing and them having to adapt to the enemy. Moving on.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, there we go. I lost my place. Okay. White House has continued to post clips and other references to games since then. Judging by their posts, they are particularly appropriating child-friendly Nintendo games for their propaganda. How did we get here? How is it that Sorry, let's take. Hold on. Okay. How is it that America's highest political office post after post one would otherwise associate with anxious teenagers, reactionary influencers, and bloodthirsty warmongers?
Because they have a sense of humor and don't shove decorum so far up their ass that they can't take an actual shit without medical assistance.
Why
Sorry, go ahead.
Why are computer games suddenly being promoted as something of a cult by America's most conservative government in modern times?
No, they're using games as fodder for memes, especially very popular, very universally appealing games, because that is how you meme properly. That is how you unironically relate to the use. That's how you avoid doing a how do you do fellow kids, by actually having your fingers on the pulse of people who don't shove decorum up their ass like pull up a scarecrow all the fucking time. Far be it from me to be controversial here, but I'm glad that someone in the fucking government has the residual humanity and relatability left over to be able to meme about such things. That to me, that is a good thing. Fuck your decorum, fuck your norms, and fuck your institutions. If you can't do something that warrants you being taken seriously in such a way, at the very least, you can lighten the fuck up and be a fucking human. Because unlike the boomer generation that really did want the politicians they voted for to be respectable and elder statesmen and crap, the generation starting with the Gen Xers and going all the way down to Gen Alpha now would very much like if we could just stop playing the decorum game and realize that these are actual people with hopefully organic human reactions to things, which, yes, includes having a sense of humor every now and then and being able to meme and use popular culture to their advantage. It's not immoral for them to do so. It's not some betrayal of their office or some shit. It's them re-injecting humanity into political offices. And again, speaking on the behalf of Gen Xers, Millennials, Zoomers, and Gen Alpha, I'd much rather have a human being who behaved like a human being than some sort of elder statesman Ben Stein robot. Moving on.
Back to the beginning, gaming culture has been at the center of the cultural war that has gripped the West like a mayor for the past decade. And much has been said about what it's all about. Focus has been on young men and a much talked about counterculture that challenges mainstream society. Now we've been sorry. Now we've been given access to information that adds further fuel to the theory that powerful backers have had a major influence on the radicalization of men, especially online in the game community, and how convicted sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein has been involved behind the scenes.
Well, given that Jeffrey Epstein knows or knew the dirty laundry of every fucking politician under the sun, I'd be very surprised if he wasn't puppeteering some things behind the scenes. However, being as I remember what Gamergate was and is, and remember it back in its heyday, no, it really wasn't backed by anyone of particular substance in the like political or celebrity arena. It was very much the opposite. It was very much the majority of journalism, the majority of the arts, and the majority of all the great and good in the halls of respectability and power actively demonizing Gamergate and acting as though it was the prelude to some sort of fascist regime. Derp. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, sorry, it's I left the page real quick and now I have to it has to be retranslated.
Mm,
It's taking a minute.
yep.
Okay, there we go. Following the release of millions of files related to the Epstein investigation, it has emerged that he had very close contact with a number of powerful figures and celebrities around the world, including Norway's Crown Princess Mette Marit, I think, former Prime Minister Torbjorn Jagland, and diplomat couple Tjerje Rød Larsen and Mona Juul. And that's how you say it. Again, I'm not good with names, so please bear with me on that.
He could he I will vouch for him in the sense that he could literally fuck up John Smith, folks. Anyway, moving on.
Contact with
You're breaking up there, bud.
you know.
A little better.
Okay.
Okay, now you're good.
More direct. Um, hold on. Let me 1 second. I need to check something real quick.
Okay.
Okay. So I was trying to see if I had my mic on instead of it just being my computer. Okay. Let me reread that then. More directly relevant to the gaming industry, however, is that Epstein had contact with key players in the gaming cultural sphere. It has long been known that Epstein and Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist and former chairman of the far right Breitbart News, kept in touch, but not to what extent. Now, the emails show that the relationship between them was extensive. Okay.
What does Steve Bannon have to do with Gamergate? I will answer my own question. Steve Bannon mostly has sweet fuck all to do with Gamergate. Yes, Breitbart was ostensibly on the side of Gamergate and actually is one of the few outlets to actually give Gamergate some decent non-conspiratorial coverage. But they weren't just because they were adjacently sympathetic to or at least willing to hear out Gamergate's side of its own story, doesn't mean A, that they were part of Gamergate, or B, that Gamergate was some kind of imposed top-down inorganic AstroTurf thing. It was very organic. It was mostly insular internet types doing internet things. And even if we wanted to say that the journalists that did occasionally give Gamergate some decent coverage were on the same side as Gamergate, or at least sympathetic to it, I would argue that the person in the Breitbart sphere most closely tied to Gamergate is not Bannon, but Milo Yiannopoulos. Anyway, moving on.
You have your TV on? Oh, hey, Trent.
My roommate does.
Okay. Hey, Giant Troll, good to see you. Work, so response will be minimal. That's fine. I also keep forgetting about the stream lately for some reason, so feel free to remind if you want. Hi, I'm doing fine. Had a minor flood in my house today. Nothing too major. Got that fixed. Work's been kicking my ass like usual. So, gonna see Mortal Kombat 2 tomorrow. We're gonna do a review next week. So, okay. But why is an American financier and former White House chief strategist relevant to Gamer News readers? The Eternal Gamergate. In 2014, the phenomenon of Gamergate took off in earnest. Gamergate was, in short, a loose reactionary movement formed by mainly young men on the internet.
I would argue that Gamergate got started in 2013, but otherwise probably correct so far, ostensibly.
You're going to eat your words in a sec. Okay. The movement was anti-feminist, chauvinistic, and racist, and vilified and harassed games developers, studios, individuals, and journalists with whom they disagreed.
It was anti-feminist, it was not chauvinistic, and it was not racist. Gamergate was very much multiracial, multi-ethnic, and multi-gendered. Because, and I will say this as often and as loud as I have to, feminism is not women. It is a particular ideology, and it's not some sort of window into the female oversoul or hive mind or whatever the fuck. Feminism is not women. Feminism is an ideology that people choose to adopt. And by the way, just to be entirely clear here, male feminists are stupider than female feminists because at least female feminists have the decency to be self-interested, whereas even other feminists will agree with me when I say there is no such creature lower on the food chain than a male feminist. Also, very often male feminist types wind up exhibiting the very same toxicity that they project onto all of masculinity or a significant portion of masculinity. What often happens with male feminists is they fucking find toxic, sociopathic, or otherwise cluster B tendencies in themselves, but rather than take responsibility for those tendencies in themselves, they assume that this is what it is to be a man, and therefore that all men are guilty of these same feelings. Which, by the way, they're not. But anyway, moving on.
Okay. Gamergate wanted to appear as if they were arguing for more ethical coverage of games in the media. It became immediately obvious that this was not the case. From the beginning, the campaign was about removing female and minority voices, in particular from the gaming industry. Please read more about Gamergate genders and gender and gaming in the undersigns complimentary analysis from 2017 here.
Okay, the thing is, okay. First of all, Many of us Gamergaters, and I count myself among them, are and were diverse and of various identity categories. The point is that intersectional feminist types of the neo-Hegelian post-Frankfurt School mode were using ideological conformity to intersectionality as a vector for nepotism, which was warping the industry of games and games journalism, and thus it was necessary for a pro ethics in games journalism or pro ethics in the games industry movement to oppose intersectional feminism, which resulted in people who got their jobs based on that ideological conformity and that implicit nepotism, but who had no other merits or skills to speak of, losing those jobs or at least getting pushback from the grassroots of the internet. But again, feminism is not women, and intersectional feminism is not whatever identity it's trying to use as a human shield for its ideological precepts. Thank you very fucking much. I am gay and physically disabled. I, however, do not support the ideologies broadly known as intersectionality, third wave intersectional feminism, or indeed neo Hegelianism full stop. I do not believe that all gay people or all disabled people have to or even should universally agree on everything. And I definitely don't think that these vectors should be vectors for nepotism. Because here's the thing, I may be gay and disabled, but I have talents, skills, abilities, and merits. And the funny thing about people with talents, skills, abilities, and merits, they would rather be judged on those talents, skills, abilities, and merits than on their identity or demographic information. The people who want to hyperfixate on their demographics and only their demographics want to essentially commit stolen valor of everyone else who's ever held that identity so that they don't have to develop talent, skills, ability, and or merits. Because for some cockamamie reason, the neo-Hegelian zeitgeist of social
Like,
justice
Don.
or fucking or intersectionality really thinks that the idea of meritocracy is not just immoral, not just wrong, but a harmful socio-political delusion that they have to wake people up from. I do not agree with this premise, and I never have, and I never will, and fuck you for trying. Meritocracy is good. It is not a fiction. It is not a delusion. It is something to be striven for, and anyone who thinks otherwise, especially in the extremely spiteful, vindictive sense of the intersectionalists, can go fuck themselves. Thank you. Moving on.
Okay. Uh, the critical thing about Gamergate is that it was far more than a gaming phenomenon. In reality, it became a cultural, political showdown between a gaming industry that, to some extent, moved in step with the rest of society and a reactionary, loud minority that wanted to return to a time that never existed. The phenomena later spread to the film and music industries, and one could argue that Gamergate was the very beginning of the culture war that has later encompassed the rest of society.
The only reason why society moved in an intersectionalist direction is because intersectionality explicitly tried to ideologically and institutionally capture as much of society as it could. But that doesn't mean that moving in an intersectional direction is a moral good or even would have happened organically without it. And as for the something, something, something time that never existed, that time, that allegedly ancient time that never existed, quote unquote, was called the mid and late 2000s all the way up until about 2011. It's not that's the really fucked up thing about the intersectional feminist sleeper agents that ideologically and institutionally captured um, basically every fucking corporation and government and academic apparatus under the sun. It got started in its like nascent stages in 2009, peak um, peak in its sort of settled the nature when Obama got reelected in 2012, and in mid 2013 is when the intersectionalists, having thought they won because Obama got reelected, and assuming that the leftward drift of history was inevitable from this point forward, and that we'd never have to deal with any quote unquote reactionaries ever again, started making active moves. Unfortunately for them, the internet is an unforgiving, weaponized autist fever dream, and so pretty much from the very instance the intersectional feminists who had been slowly but surely creeping their way into every institution from 2009 to 2012 started making moves in 2013 and were almost immediately smacked down because we don't want your ideology fucking up what is otherwise a meritocratic system. And again, I'm speaking as someone who is both gay and has spastic diplegic cerebral palsy. But I also am a person who has merits and would rather be judged on those merits than on my identity, especially the demographic identity that I didn't even get to choose, if you please. Moving on.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I scrolled a little ahead and I forgot where it was at first.
Yeah.
Outside of YouTubers and social media figures, Milo Yiannopoulos, hereafter referred to as Milo, became one of Gamergate's first clear standard bearers. In a column published on September 1st, 2014, he wrote, "An army of sociopathic feminist programmers and activists, supported by painfully politically correct American technology bloggers, is terrorizing the entire industry by lying, bullying, and manipulating their way forward on the internet to gain profit and attention."
That's all true, and I will point out that Milo Yiannopoulos was at the time he claims to have gone through conversion therapy and it worked. I don't believe him in that regard. I don't think conversion therapy works, and I think it would be immoral even if it did work. But at the time of Gamergate, Milo Yiannopoulos was a gay Jewish person. So much for your Gamergate was racist and sexist theory, given that, you know, one of the standard bearers that you just admitted exists was a gay Jew who dressed like Oscar Wilde went to a 21st century rave. Moving on.
It's revealing that Milo himself, in the pre-Gamergate era, ridiculed gamers as often as he could. He wrote about gamers as stinky beta males, ball snatchers, and few things that are as embarrassing as grown men who are overzealous about games.
And a lot of people held those same opinions. Those opinions, yes, are stupid, but I'm gonna hazard a guess here and say maybe, just maybe, Milo said some of that stupid shit, was corrected, and actually took the lesson to heart. Or, you know, being slightly less romantic about it, maybe he just changed his fucking mind because he realized that gaming and gamers may be annoying to his personal sensibilities, but at least we're better than the intersectional feminists trying to institutionally capture everything from corporations to academia and in between.
All right.
Moving on.
A little about Milo makes sense. He went from mocking gamers to becoming the baton carrying knight of the most conservative gamers. His father is of Greek Irish descent, while his mother is German Jewish. Despite
Yeah.
this, Milo is, hold on.
Mhm.
Despite this, Milo is reportedly a practicing Catholic and was gay while running errands for the far right. He is reportedly ex-gay as of 2021. He is anti-EU, anti-multiculturalist, and probably identifies as British, born and raised in England, but celebrates the pan-European cultural heritage as if he were Count Richard Nicolas van Coudenhove Caligari in his own person.
Okay. Um, Gamergate was not conservative, at least not primarily. Gamergate in general was mostly center left and libertarian in nature. There was almost no traditionalist pearl clutching in the old days of Gamergate. Granted, many of the personalities that got their start in Gamergate have become more conservative over time, but that's because the media kept calling them fascist for years and years and years and years without end, and a lot of them basically went through the calculation of if they're going to tell all these salty lies about me, I might as well just embrace it and be the monster they're afraid of making me into. I don't agree with this sentiment. I desperately wish Sargon could go back to, if not his 2014 mindset, at least his like 2017, 2018 mindset, because that was peak Sargon as far as I'm concerned. But unfortunately, being at the front lines of the culture wars can sometimes leave you a little bit punch drunk and can get you overly insular into your own mind. And while that is regrettable, it's also not unexpected when you consider that if everyone calls you evil from the time you've emerged on the public scene onwards, you're bound to at least occasionally go, well, if you're gonna call me evil anyway, I might as well just put on the stereotypical organ music and make with the diabolical laughter. Moving on.
If you're looking for opinion, you're reading the wrong article. So it is this Milo Yiannopoulos Steve Bannon hired as a writer for Breitbart News in 2014. But Milo wasn't helping to popularize phrases like social justice warrior and turn women into targets for a growing reactionary audience. He was working to get Britain to leave the EU through the Brexit referendum on June 23rd, 2016.
Base. Screw the EU and its internationalist bureaucracy. Fuck them entirely. And no, I don't mean the countries attached to the EU. I mean the bureaucratic overstructure that cripples all the countries that are attached to it. With the exception, ironically, of Germany. For all of that work we did to prevent Germany from basically taking over the Western world, they seem to have backdoored themselves into that position anyway via bureaucracy, which is possibly the most conceivably German thing under the sun. We couldn't win wars, so we're just going to bureaucratize them until we're in charge anyway. Basically. Moving on.
So did many other did many other internet figures who jumped on what began as the Gamergate bandwagon and later turned into the alt-right, MAGA, and other far-right movements. One of these, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, no. You can because that's a totally different thing. I was going to read, so please.
Okay. One, the actual alt-right, as in not just any right-wing thing we don't like, but the actual definable alt-right of round about 2016, 2017, that was led by people like Richard Spencer, J.F. Garapi, and Baked Alaska and Eddie Sphinx and shit. the actual alt-right in the original context and in the original time that it existed in was a complete joke to everyone outside of it. And many of its biggest contributors, like Richard Spencer and J.F. Gariepy, were complete jokes to everyone on the internet. The only reason they have the veneer of legitimacy is because the establishment would rather believe that we're all a bunch of neo-Nazis than believe that intersectional feminism or neo-Hegelianism have ever done anything wrong. And so they go out of their way to get the opinions of people like Richard Spencer rather than acknowledge that people like Richard Spencer were a joke. And even if all of its personalities weren't a joke, which they were and are, the alt-right in its actual original softcore, like hipster white nationalist form was tiny and irrelevant to everything. They were basically just piggybacking off the anti-social justice rhetoric because they wanted an idiotic excuse to go softcore white nationalism from hipsters, and they only succeeded in making themselves entirely cringe to everyone outside of the establishment. Unfortunately, because the establishment wanted there to be Nazis to fight, they went looking for Nazis, and J.F. Gariepy and Richard Spencer were the best they could find. Which should tell you how few Nazis there actually are or were in Gamergate and other assorted fandom, pro-fandom, anti-establishment, anti-bureaucracy, anti-normative institution movements were. Moving on.
One of these was YouTube personality Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, who promoted Brexit and became a politician and candidate for UKIP in the UK. The same was true of Paul Joseph Watson, a pro-Brexit alt-right YouTuber who worked with Alex Jones at InfoWars between 2002 and 2020.
This really is very much like the rewriting one of my articles. They keep using the term alt-right, and they have no internal conception for what it means. To them, it just means anything right-wing we don't like. But yeah, Paul Joseph Watson generally is a libertarian. Same with Stefan Molyneux. He is not alt-right. He never, to the best of my recollection, had any ethnic opinions at the time the alt-right was a thing. And the alt-right, again, was A, a joke to everyone outside it, B, a tiny irrelevancy only taken seriously by the establishment because they really wanted there to be some Nazis to fight, and that was the best they could do. And C, the alt-right, as it was originally formulated, of the Richard Spencer, J.F. Gariepy mold, doesn't exist anymore. All of its personalities have gone absolutely nowhere and have basically vanished into obscurity, much to the chagrin of Mr. Spencer, who thinks he has a hipster fucking country club dickhead right to look down on people, which, if you ask me, it's just a sign of how pathetic he is, which is why Richard Spencer was, and always has been a joke. Moving on.
But here too, Epstein had a hand in the game. One of the clearest examples of his personal involvement in the culture war is that he supported French-Canadian Nazi racial scientist and YouTuber Jean-Francois Gariepy
Yeah.
with $25,000 as early as 2003. Garapi was not directly involved with Gamergate in 2014, but became one of the biggest alt-right figures on YouTube around and after Trump's election victory.
Yeah, JF Garapi is actually alt-right, and he's small and irrelevant, and even insofar as he was relevant to anything, which he wasn't, you just admitted he had nothing to do with Gamergate. Because what the alt-right did, stupidly and irrelevantly, was latch on to anti-social justice rhetoric and anti-feminist rhetoric to try and push softcore, hipsterific white nationalism, because rather than avoid politics of identity, which was the anti-social justice movement's position, they started advocating for identity politics for white people. And that's part of the reason why, that and the fact that both JF and Richard Spencer were utterly pathetic wankers, that is precisely why the majority of the anti-social justice movements laughed at them and turned them into lol cows, because they were, again, basically hipster white nationalists. They didn't even have the chutzpah to go the stereotypical skinhead route. When they tried to do a like Klan style protest, they did it with tiki torches they bought at a fucking Walmart, which is the most fucking lacrosse playing country club hipster thing I think I've ever heard. But it actually literally happened in Charlottesville that one time. Moving on.
I'm sorry, I'm so tired from work. It's been a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep, there we go. On January 30th of this year, after the release of the documents that included himself, Garapi wrote on X, Jeffrey had blemishes like all of us, but he was a good man, an ambitious man, and in many ways a visionary. More people like him could improve the world. He died for our sins. Okay.
I'm like 80% sure JF was joking, because like I say, he's a softcore white supremacist, and Jeffrey Epstein, if you couldn't tell by the name, was Jewish. Granted, JF Garapi is a Frenchman and a white nationalist, which should tell you just how self-contradictory and nonsensical his position is, given that, you know, the French were fucked by the Nazis to the point that most of the resistance in continental Europe to Nazism was French, but clearly the Nazism left some marks in JF's head. But point being, I'm 80% sure he was joking, and even if he wasn't joking, JF Garapi is an irrelevant idiot who no one has listened to since 2017, give or take, and no one should, because the actual alt-right can get fucked. The actual alt-right of the JF Garapi, Richard Spencer mold can just get mogged on, as far as I'm concerned, because they are irrelevant, effeminate little hipster douches who think that just because they have a trust fund, that makes them better than people, and they feel the need to do stolen valor for the entire fucking white race. And to point this out again, I don't support anyone being able to collectivize and stolen valorize identities, much less demographic identities. And if you're going to hyperfixate on identities, may I humbly suggest You pick one that actually meaningfully pertains to who you are as a person, not as a fucking biological demographics unit. For example, I am far more attached to my identity as a nerd or my identity as a magic user and occultist or my identity as a occasionally ritzy, elaborate taste having motherfucker, or as Kiki Astor puts it, the nouveau pot, that I am attached to my sexuality or indeed my ability status. Yes, I am disabled. Yes, this affects me every day. No, I do not let it dominate my entire life, and no, I certainly do not allow it to affect my political decisions. I am slightly more prone to letting my gay side make some decisions because, well, one needs to get laid at some point. But beyond matters of sex and romance, I don't let that inform my broader identity either, because the identities that I choose, because they describe who I am internally as a person, not externally based on demographics, and certainly not collectively based on demographics, are more important to me than my demographics, generally speaking. Moving on.
I was trying to think of something to say, but I got nothing. Okay. Um, okay. The Jesus analysis is interesting. Bad first sentence. Yeah, that's what he said. Not just because it's absurd, but because Steve Bannon also called Epstein God in a 2018 text message chain between the two, which discusses Epstein's manipulation of feminists into taunting old men, Bannon's defense of the West speech in Hungary, and Turkey's Turkey's currency collapse. Bannon writes, Bannon hammers God short.
I don't think he was referring to Epstein when he said
Oh,
God.
no, wait, hold on. He has an explanation for this. Shorting is a financial term that refers to investors who borrow a number of shares from other shareholders for rent, sell them at the current value, aim to earn large values by buying them back later at a lower price, and then give them back to the original owner. A DNB writer DNB writes, shorting is something you do because you have absolute faith in a sharp price drop.
Yes, but again, I'm not. I am. It's possible I'm missing something, but I don't think Mr. Bannon was referring to Epstein when he said God there.
It's in the text thing they were talking about. Epstein responded by saying that he doesn't think of myself that way, but to which Bannon simply wrote, I do.
I still maintain it's possible both of these people are joking, because that honestly sounds like an exchange we would have if Brainstormer for whatever reason said, God damn it or something like that, and I, being self-depreciating about my own arrogance, was like, I don't really think of myself that way, but thank you. That does seem like an exchange like we would have if we were engaged in busting each other's balls. My point being, it doesn't really prove anything, and even by the standards of the usual ad hom guilt by association things that journalists do, like it's going out of style, this is a this is a reach wider than the Grand Canyon, my friend. Because you're the only way this could possibly be a smoking gun in any sense would be if he was dead serious. Would be if they were both being dead serious when they said that, and I genuinely do not like it. it would be profoundly uncharitable to assume either of them was being literal there. I think they were just joking around in the privacy of their own text messages. But then again, what the fuck do I know? It's not like we can ask Jeffrey Epstein because he had a whole lot of being murdered by his client base scheduled for these intervening years.
I thought he killed himself.
No,
Oh. I don't care.
it was very suspicious in that he got a cellmate that day transferred in, and all of the cameras that were on his maximum security prison cell were turned off or turned away from the cell when he was supposedly killing himself. Also, there were strangulation marks consistent with someone else strangling him rather than.
I really don't. I'll be honest. I really don't care.
Mhm.
But thank you for clarifying. Norway has its own and perhaps foremost Gamergate-like figure in the YouTube Arch and the secondary channel, the Archcast, formerly known as Arch Warhammer on YouTube. The Warhammer section has been removed after threats of lawsuit from Games Workshop.
Yeah, GW sues at the drop of every fucking conceivable headwear. So that's not a smoking gun either. If you know what absurdly litigious twats Games Workshop are, that's nothing. You can get the same treatment by uploading bad fan fiction of 40K.
Sorry.
Yeah, because that's just who Games Workshop are, unfortunately.
Despite not having held any political office that we know of, Archie apparently continues to spread far-right propaganda on his channels. He has been heavily criticized for racist messages distributed to him on his own Discord server, which the website Vice reported in 2020 after extensive criticism of Arch. Vice reported, among many others, made statements against the Sami and Gypsies, and that he compared Black Americans to a race from the Warhammer universe.
Because he was memeing. He also regularly compares. He also regularly simps for the race from Warhammer Fantasy known as the Skaven. The Skaven, yeah, Skavens. But I don't think that implies that he's going to like train some kind of rat super soldier army or something. Again, a lot of this is you either actively willfully ignoring context or forgetting that people are capable of, being figurative and joking and being rhetorical rather than literal. But you need everything to be literal so that you can make a conspiratorial narrative and yet call everybody else a conspiracy theorist for, not being selectively literal about everything under the fucking sun. Now, mind you, these people are Norwegian. I don't know much about the like ethos of the Nederlanders, but I will say Arch, at least, despite being very obviously autistic, especially about his special interest, namely Warhammer, but even with Arch's self-admitted to autism, he is capable of understanding how jokes work. So I'm going to have to point out that you're probably just engaged in a whole bunch of like fucking motivated reasoning, i.e., you need things to be literal, and so they're literal. You need things to be figurative when they're not. Therefore, they are, and so on. Like it's just It's just the intellectual equivalent of peekaboo. Reality is what I say it is, regardless of any context or regardless of any actual reality. Moving on.
After about another half hour, we probably. This is a long article, so just if we want to get other things, the other two done.
Yeah, you see why I compared it to the rewriting Ripley article there.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Again, there is no evidence that Carl Benjamin or Arch had links to Epstein, but in context, that is not important. Steve Bannon saw the connection between Gamergate's politics of this content, big politics in general, and how the first could influence the other. And whether we're talking hard politics, elections, or soft politics, culture, Bannon was right. Of the Gamergaters, he said, you can activate that army, they come through Gamergate or whatever, and are drawn towards politics and Trump.
Your entire argument is premised on the connection between Gamergate and Epstein. But your entire addressing so far, at least, of Arch and Sargon is we don't have evidence of them being connected to Epstein, even though they are central figures of Gamergate. But in context, that's not important. My dudes, if you start from the premise Gamergate is connected to Epstein and Trump, and then you fail to find anything, you can't just hand wave it away by saying, in context, that's not important. You are the one who posed this premise, and therefore you are the one obligated to demonstrate A, evidence, B, underlying logic that makes either of these things make sense. If you can't, then go back to the fucking drawing board and write a different article. Like, if you. Pro tip for those who might find themselves ever doing research papers. If you start your research paper with a premise and then you find nothing to support that premise, you might want to find a different premise to research for your own self-respect, if nothing else. Holy fucking shit! How can you base the entire premise of an article on connections between Gamergate and Epstein, and then when you find next to no connections between Gamergate and Epstein, you just hand wave it away and continue prattling on as though your entire premise didn't just fall to fucking pieces. Moving on.
The big picture. It doesn't necessarily matter how influential the Gamergate foot soldiers were in the election in a sheer. Were in the election in sheer numbers. That is, however, newly liberated Gamergaters were out to vote. Well, what matters is how the rhetoric, worldview, and revolutionary culture spread to the rest of the population outside the gaming community. That's what made an impact on the public vocabulary, the psyche, and the information diet of the general population.
You just did it again. In the last 2 paragraphs or so, you have said we have these 2 figures that we don't like that are Sargon and Arch, and even though the entire premise of this article is there are connections between Gamergate and Epstein, we can't find any connections to Epstein. And now you just did it again by saying it doesn't really matter how influential the Gamergate foot soldiers are in politics, even though that's the entire fucking premise of your article. The fundamental premise of your article is that the ideological constraints or ideological framework of Gamergate somehow metastasized into all of civilization all of a sudden. And like you just how does your brain not stop you from realizing, or how does your brain stop you from realizing that you started the article with a premise and then twice now have gone, yeah, our premise is complete bullshit and only a conspiracy theorist would think it was otherwise. But that's not important because fear mongering reasons, you see. Therp. Moving on.
Big picture. Uh, doesn't necessarily matter how influential the Gamergate was. Wait, did I read that? Yeah, I did. Okay, sorry. It is this type of influence that has led the editor of Norwegian Culture War newspaper subject with a K, by the way,
Mm.
Danby Choi, to use Norwegianized words like virtue posting as often as you can.
Hmm. Moving on. I don't think there's
I,
anything to comment on there.
Virtue signaling was coined by Brexit friendly James Bartholomew in 2015 and describes people who say morally acceptable things but don't actually do anything about the problems they talk about.
You mean like you're doing now, at least from inside your own head?
If not,
Yeah, moving on.
okay, so I'll answer. In other words, the charge is that even those who say they care about injustice really don't really care, but are more concerned with appearing good regardless of what happened, might suggest or what one is willing to do. In reality, this there is 2-0 daylight between Bartholomew's virtue posting Progress Party leader Sylvie Listhaug's tyrant of goodness or disgraced psychologist student's authoritarian tolerance.
You, again, you mean like you're doing. What is this article if not performative spaffing your virtue up the wall rather than doing anything, let alone trying to understand the thing like you are supposed to by virtue of being a journalist? Back in the apparently naive days when being a journalist actually mattered and amounted to something, you actually had to you actually had to do this thing called investigative journalism, and you were supposed to have a higher degree of fidelity to the truth than you did to your own opinions. But it's 2026. We can't be having that anymore. Moving on.
Okay, that's not really important. Okay. Virtue signaling became one of the biggest and earliest accusations from the far right, including Gamergaters, against anything they didn't like, along with a trio of SJW, so it's just Warriors, Woke, and DEI, Diverse Equity and Inclusion. Add the accusations of cannibalized culture, and you have a classic reactionary buzzword cocktail. Danby Choi last used the words in an article
I'm
on.
sorry. Are you implying that those words have no meaning, or that virtue signaling isn't a thing? Because not only is virtue signaling a thing, but you are doing it now. Like right now. You are slavishly and myopically simpering for what you think virtue in the abstract is. That is to the letter what people mean when they say virtue signaling.
God damn it. Okay. Hey Don.
Yeah.
Well, given the length of this, because we're like,
Yeah, we're going to have to. We're going. Congratulations, folks! We appear to have found a new white whale. How far did we get relative to the overall night?
um, hmm, a quarter.
Okay, so it probably won't be a 20-part series like the Rewriting Ripley article was,
Oh,
but
that
we
was only
probably
10.
will. But we
That's 10 parts.
uh, but
They were long 10 parts, mind you,
yeah,
but still.
but yes, this probably will be at least for a few weeks. This will be our white whale for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. Reading that has really drained me mentally.
Mhm.
I want to move on.
Yep.
Okay, give me a second to get like everything. Like, sorry, I was laying down to read that. Probably would explain why. Oh shit! I am so sorry, Giant Troll. I have not seen your comments. Ah. Okay. Shit. Okay. If John's an intersectionality rant, it's like how many white supremacists want to take credit for all the achievements of the white race, but outside of was Kang's, these identities are mostly victim point farming. Uh,
Yeah, I personally just don't feel like we should be engaged in collectivist stolen valor for demographic identities. Like I'm slightly more lenient on like skill or knowledge based identities. Like if you're an engineer and you want to and you want to be proud that you're in the same lineage as people like Stephen Hawking or Michio Kaku or whatever. That makes perfect sense to me. Like I occasionally feel proud to be an occultist because of all the proud lineages of occultists, sorcerers, and magicians there are in the world. But like that to me is far more justifiable because again, these are identities that describe your internal life and internal world and describe developing knowledge and or skills. Whereas demographic information is the lowest and basest form of irrelevant bullshit. It'd be it'd be like engaging in stolen valor based on eye color or hair color, for God's sake. And just to be fully clear, anyone so boring and insufferable as to need to borrow stolen valor from their fucking demographic identities has absolutely nothing going on and is a really, really lame ass, boring motherfucker. Because people with actual merits focus on those actual merits and don't feel the need to collectivize and then steal the valor of their fucking baser demographics.
okay. She says a lot. Hmm. Okay, there we go. All right, Don sent this from Wired.com. MAGA is confused about animal farms. Was published April 30th, 2026. E.J. Dixon. Subheader: The new film is the latest adaptation of George Orwell's novel, based on critiques coming from right-wing influencers. It seems few of them fully grasp the book's message.
Well, I can at least see how that could be true because the EFAP crowd do knee jerk react to a lot of shit. It's not
hard to see where Andy Serkis's Animal Farm completely bullshits its way through not even trying to address the original source material by hyperfixating on capitalism bad and commercialism bad rather than, any combination of Stalinism, communism, authoritarianism, or ideological revolutionaryism being bad. But and for the record, I'm sure there are also plenty of people who are not MAGA that are poo-pooing the Andy Circus Animal Farm because it's shit. And shit things tend to invite negative criticism. But moving on.
If you read George Orwell's classic political satire Animal Farm in 7th grade, I never read that book.
What are they fucking teaching in schools anymore?
Uh,
Oh, American educational system, thou art a heartless bitch.
Alright, you probably remember the basic contours of the plot. Fed up with human rule, a group of well-intentioned barnyard animals set up their own egalitarian society with disastrous results. Published in 1945, Animal Farm has a timeless and certainly contemporary relevant message. It's about how the impulse to retain power will always come at the expense of our basic morality.
Not necessarily. The problem is the particular ideology of the Animal Farm and its parallels to things like Marxism and communism. Also, the Animal Farm is not egalitarian, it is equitarian, and I will make that distinction. The difference being, equality or egalitarianism implies equality of opportunity, whereas what's going on in Animal Farm is very much, at least in theory, supposed to be an equality of outcome system, and equality of outcome is not sustainable because people have different aptitudes and different talents. Therefore, they will necessarily beget different ends. And if you try to standardize the ends so hard that you disincentivize people developing those talents, then your civilization is doomed. Moving on.
This, however, seems to have been lost on most MAGA influencers signed the book in middle school, if they even read it at all. After their failure to cancel Barbie or the Wicked movies, conservatives have moved on to a new film adaptation of Animal Farm, animated film, which is directed by Lord of the Rings star Andy Serkis. Opens May 1st. Anything or
It probably will also be his last directorial gig for a while, because you may say that we quote unquote failed to cancel Barbie and failed to cancel the Wicked movies, but we are definitely succeeding if indeed we are attempting to cancel the Andy Circus Animal Farm in canceling it, because it opened at number 6 on the worldwide box office with less than $4 million. So I'm not sure where it will end up by the end of this weekend, which would be its second weekend, but it's gonna die, I think. Because it deserves to, because it's shit. And I'm not even just saying that because it gets the ideology and philosophy wrong. Even if there were no ideologically warped or politically warped edge to it at all, it would still be like lowest common denominator kind of like animated comedy. Like Sausage Party, this ain't. It barely rises to the level of the worst of the Minion movies, guys. Even without the ideological woo-woo, this Animal Farm is a shit movie and an even shittier adaptation. Moving on.
Problem, however, is that they fail to reach a consensus on what the actual message of Animal Farm is. The right-wing outrage cycle has a movies featuring Seth Rogen making fart jokes appears to have been sparked by influencers like Emily Saves America and Riley Gaines, who recently posted the trailer for the film. In an April 28th X post, Gaines tweeted that the film was incredibly well done. They do a perfect job reminding viewers that Marxism always has and always will fail. She hashtagged her tweet Animal Farm partner, leading people to assume the post had been the result of a paid partnership between herself and Angel Studios, the Utah-based entertainment company distributing the film, which was also behind the faith-based blockbusters Sound of Freedom and The King of Kings.
See, the problem here is that Andy Serkis years ago explicitly told us he wanted to do a version of Animal Farm where capitalism and corporatism were the villains instead of communism. So you can't pull it's anti-communist if we know the director explicitly told us he wanted to make it anti-capitalist and he appears to have succeeded in doing so. That's also why a lot of people gave the Animal Farm partner tweets shit, because it was very obvious that they were reviewing the movie as it probably should have been instead of the movie as it actually is, i.e., everyone and their mother assumes that Animal Farm adaptations are going to decry some version of communism or utopian radicalism, but this movie didn't. This movie made a secondary human villain responsible for all the reasons Napoleon goes evil, and frames essentially corporatism as the enemy. Moving on.
Alright, many on both left and right found Gaines' tweet bizarre, in part because while Animal Farm is certainly a critique of Stalinism, it's also very clearly not a full-throated endorsement of capitalist ideals. The human owner of the farm is a capitalist, and after he's overthrown the power-hungry pigs, mimic his behavior, adopting human clothes and profiting off the labor of the other farm animals. The book is ultimately less a condemnation of specific systems of governance than a critique of mankind's lust for power and blind adherence to ideology.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. Napoleon was always a manipulative shit stirrer, and as Brainstormer and I have frequently mentioned, power doesn't really change a person. Power only magnifies what they have the potential to do. It doesn't, as I've often said, and Brainstormer has backed me up on multiple times, power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. It just so happens that sometimes the things it reveals are flaws, which results in sort of an inverse butterfly effect, whereby if you take the small cracks and imperfections of a human's character and you magnify them out to, say, the Grand Canyon scale, there's going to be larger holes in the earth than there would be if it remained small, do you see? So yeah, power doesn't corrupt, and it's not even necessarily corruptive to human nature. What it is the capacity to do more of whatever you're already inclined to do. And if what you're already inclined to do is susceptible to evil, then evil you will be. Such a shame, but 'tis true. Moving on.
Alright, and the latest adaptation, Circus also tweaked the plot by adding a greedy human character, voiced by Glenn Close, who wants to buy the farm, characterizing the film in US Today as about authoritarianism and power corrupting, and our response to that. Much that, in theory at least, would certainly resonate with 2026 audiences. Clay did not, however, resonate with many of Gaines' ideological bedfellows who pounced on her for being a Marxist shill promoting communism is the new gay for pay. Right-wing podcaster Tim Pool tweeted earlier this month. He posted that he had turned down an offer from Angel Studios to promote the film due to it being pro-communism and anti-capitalist. The influencer Peachy Keenan also excoriated the film,
Yes.
calling it retarded socialist propaganda.
Yeah, and it is. And again, it's not even just the ideological and political aspect of it. This movie is shitty on many levels that have nothing to do with its politics and everything to do with the apparent lack of fucks given by anyone involved. Moving on.
Alright, the ability to reach a consensus on the actual message of the new Animal Farm movie may very well be a reflection of its artistic merits or lack thereof. Indeed, the film currently has a 23% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's also just genuinely a reflection on how little media literacy exists in our current information landscape, an issue that, in fairness, is far from specific to the right. Unless the moral messaging of a work of fiction is clearly and consistently flagrant throughout, there seems to be a complete inability to accept ambiguity or contradiction, or to acknowledge that multiple ideas can be good or bad at the same time.
I agree. Still not the point you should be making with Animal Farm, but I agree with the base premise there. Moving on.
Though middle schoolers might be able to immediately grasp the takeaways from Animal Farm, it says something that high-profile political commentators can't. In fairness, Orwell himself, who has been claimed by both right and the left during his lifetime and beyond, probably would have appreciated the confusion his novel has wrought, even if he may not have appreciated Seth Rogen's fart jokes.
Yeah, the lowest common denominator fart joke thing. That's almost worse than getting the political context wrong.
That was the end of that article.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another one Dawn sent me. Okay. Ironically, LMP had a great episode. Hold on. Ironically, in a lot of schools nowadays, you have high school students who can't read. Oh, Jesus Christ! Sorry again. I'm sorry, Giant Troll. I'm not seeing your articles. Not articles. Your comments. Like as soon as it pop up. George Orwell, Tom Ryan is spinning hard. Not for this. If I recall, he was not a fan of capitalism. At best, they were upset somewhat. A for-profit dystopian corporation at that is butchering his work. More just a society right now, unironically, in a lot of schools nowadays, you have high school students who can't read. Meanwhile, schools are filled with bullying, have more abuse incidents than the church. I think even not boiting, student on student, and regularly try to drag their students into political protest. Ironically, MLP had a great episode on communism. Aren't the two lead actresses also seemingly on drugs, insane, and or in a cult? Something is going wrong with those two. That is unfortunately a good point. People nowadays don't know how to feel in a scene without things like mood music or lighting cues. It's the movie version of the yellow paint in games.
Mm.
Okay. I Alright, so from the University of University.org, overhated female characters are symptom of misogyny in audiences. It's written by entertainment writer and published April 23rd, 2026.
I would argue that writing shit characters makes this symptom almost inevitable, because here's the thing: male characters don't generally, and yes, there are exceptions, but the exception does not disprove the rule. Um, Male characters in general have to be likable on at least some level in order to justify the audience not rooting against them. Which sometimes, if you have a villain protagonist or a serial killer protagonist or something, you want your audience to be rooting against your main character. But where female characters are concerned, if you have any problem with them in the same way you would a male character who um displayed bitter spite, short-sightedness, and egotism, um you get called a misogynist. And them's the rules. If I were to say that, I'm trying to think of a really stupid and myopic character that fits like the stereotypical masculine mindset.
Um, okay, fuck. Who was the brother of the friend of Norman in Paranorman?
Um, Mitch.
Does that count?
As an example of that sort of character, yes, but I'm trying to think of a really badly written example of like
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't.
of a masculine stereotype. Because if I were to say that Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, if I were to say that people not liking Gaston from Beauty and the Beast is a sign that they're misandrists, I would get laughed off the face of the earth, because that's a really stupid bit of copium to try and explain why you didn't write a better character. But when a female character is written like an insufferable bitch or an overly standoffish, spiteful cunt, you're not allowed to say she's a bad, annoying, insufferable character, because if you do, you will get called a misogynist, as per this article. And that is why people are growing increasingly distrustful of these sorts of female characters, because unlike when a male character is written poorly and the author fucks up creating a likable character, you're allowed to criticize them, and so there are fewer examples on average of male characters that get away with this shit as compared to female characters, because female characters get a moral exemption, apparently. Moving on.
Yeah, Giant I know what MLP is. My Little Pony. I watched the Friendship is Magic series because it went on for a very long time. While I was growing up, like few episodes here and there, nothing. It didn't stick with me for obvious reasons.
Mm.
Just answering.
Brainstormer is not a brony, confirmed.
Okay. Season 4 of the animated show Invincible aired from March 18th to April 22nd, reigniting the fandom and discourse around it. One of the most interesting conversations around the show's characters is around Amber Bennett. Fans of Invincible often label Amber as annoying and selfish, making her one of the most hated characters in the show. However, Amber is not a supervillain. Instead, she falls into the category of female characters crucified for being annoying. Other female characters like Skylar White from Breaking Bad and Carmela Soprano from The Sopranos are criticized in similar ways due to the audience's misogyny.
Again, no, it's a sign of badly written characters. Because even when a male character is meant to be an asshole, there are things you need to do to ensure that they are likable or at least interesting assholes. Not only are these female characters assholes, but they're very boring, very unnecessarily standoffish, very bland assholes that have nothing interesting to recommend them. But you don't get to say that with a female character, and that's why there's more of these types of characters among women. Because when an author fucks up writing a male character, you're allowed to just say, this is a shittily written male character and I find him insufferable. But if you say, this is a shittily written female character and I find her insufferable, the moral armor shows up and you get called a misogynist. I would argue that if we want female characters to be written to a higher standard, i.e. the same standard as we hold even male asshole characters to, we need to take away the everyone I don't like or doesn't like me is just a misogynist card. Because that allows them to skate accountability on the back of morality, and that will result in stagnation and stuntedness on the part of writers trying to write female characters. Moving on.
Also, and like people have always brought up Amber in the last couple of years since Invincible started. She is annoying because how she was written in later episodes. People tend to like her actually in the early episodes of season 1, but when it comes to the reveal of that she knew Mark was invincible, I figured it out and everything. It immediately swaps because she
tries to make everything all about her, and she blames him for essentially trying to help people and be a hero.
Yeah. And
that is an extremely selfish mindset, and she's never called out for it by characters in universe, and so the audience takes it upon themselves to do it for the show.
I've seen like a couple of videos, people talking about it, and I think there was one that actually did rewrite it to make her like she was the daughter of Darkwing, who was like the Batman that was killed by Omnia in the first episode with the other Guardians of the Globe. That one intrigued me, like in terms of an idea there. Anyway.
Yep.
The pattern is striking. Largely male audiences see women who respond realistically to the emotional pain caused by men and then perceive these female characters as antagonists rather than rational figures. But they don't respond realistically.
They don't respond rationally. They don't respond in a way that is even relatable, let alone engaging or explicable. That's the thing. When a male character is an asshole, like a Dr. House or a Jack Sparrow, he still needs to be charming. He still needs to be engaging. He still needs to be an enjoyable presence on the screen. But female characters like Amber get away with not being charming, likable, or interesting while they're being assholes, because if you don't like a female character who's an unlikable asshole, then you get called a misogynist. They essentially get a moral get out of jail free card because you're not allowed to take issue with a female character in the same way you can take issue with a male character. And that's why male characters, even the asshole ones, tend to be better written, because nobody get, like, much as it pains me as a men's rights advocate that nobody really gives a fuck about men on average, it at least has the added benefit of, because nobody gives a fuck about men, you can criticize male characters for being unlikable dickheads as and when they are being that. And as a result, people who are writing male characters either write them to be charming and interesting to begin with, or realize their mistake early on if they fail to do so and fix it. Whereas if you even so much as insinuate that a character like Amber needs to be fixed so as to not make her an insufferable bitch, you will get called a misogynist. Case in point, this article exists. Moving on.
Okay. General who's calling Amber and Skylar annoying. If they are, that is secondary to be disgusting people the story wants us to root for and feel bad for, often resembling people in their lives to where they can put themselves in the shoes of the men they abuse. Okay, so I can't say anything about Skylar because I've never seen Breaking Bad.
I can't really weigh in on that either. I've only seen a couple episodes of Breaking Bad, and I've never sat down and watched the whole thing all the way through.
But I mean, I wouldn't say Amber's disgusting or anything like that. I just don't think she's really. Well, I'll read here because I was reading like the next part. So, much of the backlash against Amber centers around how she treats the protagonist of Invincible, Mark Grayson, who is accused her of being selfish, unfair, and overly demanding, ignoring the emotional reality of her situation. In the early stages of the relationship, Mark was an unreliable partner who often disappeared without an explanation. The abandonment she felt was understandable. It reflected her desire for normality and stability. While Amber was flawed, she was not afforded sympathy like Mark when he struggled to balance his personal and superhero lives or made bad judgments in battle. Okay, but that's completely different sort of circumstances, given that
Mark is putting other people first by being a hero. That is why Mark gets more leeway. It's because he's not choosing to be a dick, one, and two, insofar as he knows he's being a dick, he feels bad about it. We never get anything from Amber that suggests she feels bad about treating Mark this way. And here's the other thing. If Amber never learned why Mark was always disappearing, I don't think we would be having this conversation, because as Brainstormer pointed out earlier, when she didn't know he was invincible, when she didn't know why he was disappearing, she was a perfectly fine character, because that is a perfectly fine and understandable question of where in the fuck is my significant other constantly disappearing to when we're supposed to be having date night. But the issue is for Amber specifically, that when she finds out why, when Mark explains to her why he's been, going hither and thither and yon, and it's because he's a superhero who's trying to save people and help the world. Her 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 reaction does not change. She her understanding of him as a person and her interactions with him do not change as a result of her gaining this knowledge. That is precisely when people realize that she is a bitch. Because not only does him being invincible not change her perception of him at all, she remains mostly unaffected by that. Her standards actually go up because she now knows that he has all these powers. She actually raises the stakes for, well, if you have all these powers, why can't you make time for me? And it's that narcissistic sense of entitlement in the face of someone trying his damnedest to not only be a good person, but to be the best person he can be and put himself on the line in a self sacrificial way to try and make the world a better place. That is why people think of Amber as a bitch. Not because she was conflicted and confused when she didn't know he was invincible, but because her only thought when she found out that her boyfriend is, one, putting his life on the line to help the world, and two, almost killing himself or injuring himself frequently in the doing of it, she didn't think, oh Jesus, my boyfriend is in danger, I can't cope with that. That would have been an understandable reaction. She didn't think, oh gee, good for me, I got a guy who will literally put everyone else's problems on his back and try to help the world as much as he possibly can. Her only response was, wah, my superhero boyfriend doesn't pay enough attention to me. Wah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually bringing up this example. Okay, how they kind of handle this a little better. So the MCU's Wonder Man.
Yeah.
Weird little pull, I know, but there is a scene towards the latter half of the series, like I think before the last episode, before the finale, the penultimate episode, where Simon Williams, the main character, has a chat with a former lover of his, right? She broke up with him earlier in this season just because, like, well, okay, context. Guy's been mostly very self-absorbed and trying to be like an actor and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of more or less just dedicated to himself rather than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But in that episode, that scene specifically, they reconnect, and she lets him know that she knew about his powers because there's a whole plot line of like he has to keep his powers secret because there's like this whole like stigma against people with powers in the filmmaking industry.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept it because it was, and she never let him know that she knew because it wasn't her secret to tell. And she was very like very understanding, very kind to him, and hoped that he'd find someone that he can be open and honest with, more so even if that wasn't her. And she said that she still loved him, but like their paths kind of just went in different directions.
Which is why no one blames her for her reaction, because despite the fact that she is dumping him, and that is unfortunate, she's not demonstrating a childish, myopic sense of narcissism, whereas somebody like Amber very much does and is.
Yeah, I just anyway, Ventura, you did bring up a good point. By the way, if Amber got better later, then that only applies to her at that point in time. I think she got dropped like after season 2, right?
Yeah, they broke up, and then Mark and Eve started going out, and we don't really, I don't think, see much of her after that.
Well, it's kind of the same thing with the comics, although there's a brief thing, but I doubt they're going to put it in here in the show.
Well, yeah, the character was always kind of an afterthought, unfortunately.
Well, no, she was the first girlfriend Mark had, and it was a whole thing. But I don't think they're going to put in like Amber being part of an abusive relationship and Mark kind of intervening in that. Like that happened in the comics, so.
I could see them using it if they juxtapose it with the Anissa rape thing.
Oh boy. Anyway, in contrast, Mark's current girlfriend in season 4, Samantha Eve Wilkins, is more accepted for her flaws. Her compatibility with Mark stems from them both being superheroes, exempting their relationship from a lot of the issues that occurred in Mark and Amber's. I mean,
the reason Eve does not get treated the way Amber does is because her reaction is not, again, childish, narcissistic myopia. Even when she's doing something that is rather dark, like in the most recent season having an abortion, she doesn't do it out of vindictiveness. She doesn't do it out of spite. She doesn't do it out of stubbornness. She doesn't do it out of contrariness. She does it because she knows that she doesn't want to be alone and having to raise this child, and she doesn't know when Mark is going to come back. And she also knows that while she's pregnant, she is somewhat vulnerable. Granted, her powers even that out somewhat, but she knows that she too must prioritize being able to help people and help the world, and so she makes a bad choice, or a very difficult choice at the very least, in aborting Mark's baby. But instead of being angry with Mark, instead of being shrewish, instead of tantruming, which, let's face it, that's kind of what Amber did, Eve realizes she did a wrong thing, realized she did a fucked up thing, and took responsibility for that, one, and two, actually appears to feel emotionally vulnerable as a result of it. And that's the thing. Despite the article just now saying that Amber was feeling emotionally vulnerable because of Mark being a superhero and it's never framed in that way in the show. That is the writer of the article basically doing writing spackle. What actually happened was not Amber feeling forsaken and vulnerable. It was Amber feeling angry and put out. And yes, there are male characters who are also assholes. Like,
I want to point this out, relating to Invincible, right?
Yeah.
Up until season 3, most people hated Rexplode.
Yep.
Just a fucking asshole. Granted, even in the actually, they did his character a lot better in the show than they did in the comics because he was just kind of an asshole all the way through.
Yeah.
Kind of still wish we got that special episode that delved into his actual origin because that was.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Rex being a fuckboy. Let's not beat around the bush. Rex being a little bit of a dude bro fuckboy, such as it is A, either played for comedy, which is the thing, or is treated in universe like an annoyance that it is. That's the difference. you can make a character an asshole and have them be a charming asshole, like your Doctor Houses, your Stephen Stranges, your Robert
Jack Sparrow.
Downey, Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, your Jack Sparrow. You could also have a character be a bit of a dude bro and have that dude bro-ness played for comedy. Many characters that fall under the category of himbo kind of fit this mold. Even though he's not quite a himbo, somebody like Beast Boy from Teen Titans, a lot of his more like surfer bro vibes are played for comedy. But you or and I'll get to the third thing and then we'll get back on track. Another thing you can do is have a character be a bit of a dickhead and then frame their being a dickhead as an annoyance that other characters have to play off of. And the important part, frame their actions as bad, not just in the meta-narrative sense, but also in universe, by having other people be annoyed with him or pissed off at him or angry with him or just beat the fuck out of him, which is what they do with Rex. Even when he's not being played for comedy or charming asshole points, he's being appropriately handled in universe. But with a character like Amber, because the writers think we're supposed to be on her side because something, automatically sympathetic because woman card, she's never called out for doing what she does. Unlike Rex, who is called out basically all the time in every scene he's in, if he's not being a charming asshole or a funny asshole, he's being called out for being a dickhead. Whereas no one, not even Mark, mind you, was able to call Amber out for being a dickhead. And that's the difference. That's why people often have negative reactions to these female characters. Not just because they're badly written, not just because they're insufferable, but because their badly written insufferableness is never called out in universe. And so the audience feels compelled to rebalance the scales, so to speak. I.e., if the story of the show, if the story of the movie isn't going to treat the character like the asshole they obviously are, I'm gonna do it. Basically, is the like subconscious impulse the audience frequently has with characters like this.
Hold on.
Yeah, moving on.
All right. Additionally, since Eve and Mark are seen as an in-game couple, Amber was treated as an obstacle to the relationship and had a disposable love interest. Okay,
She made herself that by being a bitch. That was not a foregone conclusion. They could have made Amber the Lois Lane to Mark's Superboy, but they didn't because she was too busy being a bitch.
well, I don't think it was really like she's just the first girlfriend, like a lot of girls have that.
I mean, in theory, but if she was better written, there would have at least been a question of can we write a better ending for her? Whereas when she left in the show as it is currently written, nobody batted an eye or even mourned her because she was an insufferable bitch.
Right. I'm not disputing that. I'm just pointing out that she's not I don't think she's an obstacle. Hell, not even a disposable love. She's just like the first girlfriend.
Yeah.
Mark
Insofar as she is an obstacle, she's an obstacle because of her being insufferable.
Don. Yeah, finish my point, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't see her much as either a disposable love interest or an obstacle. To explain what I mean about being like the first, it is one of like the tropes that superhero genre has of like the first girlfriend or the first love interest, which ultimately doesn't work out for the hero, but at least pushes them forward to find kind of their one true love. Which yes, I do understand the description I have does make her sound disposable, but they usually leave a good enough impact that you do that a part of you wonders what could have been, but also uh, push the hero forward in some form or fashion.
I will.
Can I?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I do concede that it could be because given how Invincible has worked in the past, this could somewhat be a subversion of that trope in the sense that her being shitty, which again I don't. I think we're both in agreement wasn't the actual intention, but if we kind of from our analysis here currently, we can make the argument for that. Of her being a very shitty girlfriend, which ups Mark's standards and, you know, realizes certain things and stuff, and why he even starts going out with Eve is, realizing that trying to date someone who isn't kind of in the life of a superhero or superhero adjacent wouldn't really work for him.
Okay, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here and say that just because something is a trope doesn't mean you should do it. And if you're going to do a trope, you have to put the work in to actually make it work. And the problem with Amber is that she isn't a Gwen Stacy. She isn't a Lana Lang. She isn't a good example of that trope.
No, I don't disagree. I was just pointing that out.
I know, but it kind of made it sound like you were saying it should automatically be there because it is a trope. And
No, what? Okay, well, that was not my intention with what I was saying at all.
Yeah, it sounded like your main justification for her existing was that the trope exists.
No,
And
no. That okay. Let me to re-explain myself then, if that's what it came off as. I simply mentioned the trope because that is what it seemed to be at first, or at the very least, the main love interest before things happen with Eve. Granted, they fucked it up. I won't deny that at all. But yeah,
I think a better way of handling it would have been have Mark be single for the first season or two, and then have him develop feelings for Eve later. I don't think he needs to be in a relation like there. And unfortunately, this is partly down to Amber being written poorly, but there being a first love interest didn't add anything.
no, that's why. Again, that is why I said it was this version of the trope where she didn't really do shit.
I'm not certain it was a conscious
No,
subversion
that's
if
not.
it was one.
That's okay. Let me explain myself in that regard. Then I'm not saying it was the intention. It clearly wasn't. They fucked it up immensely. What I'm saying is, looking at it now with hindsight and analyzing, you could say that was kind of what was there or could have been, but it isn't. I was pointing that out for the sake of discussing it more so than.
But yeah, back on topic. Insofar as Amber is an obstacle, she's an obstacle because of how she acted and who she is. Insofar as she's an obstacle, she's only an obstacle because she didn't I'm gonna be mean here and say she didn't know how good she had it, because this is the thing about this is the thing that I I think this is where a lot of people drew the line and went from this character is vaguely annoying to actively fuck this bitch. Um, the fact that um when Mark realizes she's not happy, he blames himself and never once calls her out for being self-centered and narcissistic. The, the, which, to be fair, is in character for Mark because Mark is a sweet little cinnamon roll. But point being, when it became very obvious that the universe of the show was not going to treat her actions as they were being portrayed, that I think that dissonance is what made people annoyed. In the same way as with characters like Brie Larson's Captain Marvel or Tatiana Maslany's She-Hulk as she's written in the She-Hulk show. We have had many discussions about how if they had actually given the fans an actual She-Hulk show, she could have probably played that character fine. But as she is written in the MCU, She-Hulk is an insufferable bitch character, but almost never treated as that. Unlike
Hey, Don.
male asshole characters like RDJ, as Tony Stark, unlike Doctor Strange, unlike John Constantine, or like I'm trying to think of other examples of asshole hero characters. Unlike a lot of those characters,
Oh, Guy Gardner.
yeah, unlike a lot of those characters, at no point does there's never a character building moment where they realize, holy fuck, I'm a dickhead. And as a result, this is the way this usually goes.
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for cutting you off. I feel like we're reiterating points at this point.
Yeah, but the way it works with male asshole hero characters is they're a much worse asshole in the beginning, then they lose something or have some sort of realization or someone in their life tells them off, and then they keep their asshole tendencies, but they also reform those asshole tendencies to make them a better person.
Oh, Green Arrow.
Yeah.
He's actually kind of worse than Iron Man, I think. I've
Well,
looked
yeah.
at comics, actually.
Well, yeah, but point being, with female characters like this, like Captain Marvel, like She-Hulk, like Amber, the universe of the story is never allowed to take anything from them. And as a result, they never feel the need to get better. In fact, the usual...
Hey, Don, I'm sorry. I just like...
Yeah. The usual ethos for a female hero like this is not she's an asshole who needs to redeem herself and become a better asshole while still being an asshole. The ethos for characters like Captain Marvel is she just needs to realize how awesome she is automatically. And the world needs to stop, quote unquote, oppressing her or being an obstacle to her or whatever the fuck.
Drandra, you remember who came up with narrative gaslighting Dalton? Because that fits pretty well. Fits this pretty well. The story is trying to gaslight you into thinking something should be something else, and it's you that's wrong.
Yeah, I guess that does sort of apply.
Can we move on now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Amber and Mark's story was set up from the beginning to have conflict, but instead of this being analyzed for what it can teach the audience about relationships, it led to Amber being hated. It
It's not the story's job to teach the audience, you daft cunts.
fucking Christ. Okay, set up for conflict, sure, but it wasn't handled fucking right. Or well, we already talked at length of that already.
We've already gone over this. The thing I'm focusing on here is the author of this article implied that it's the story's job to teach the audience, and fuck you know, the writers or the story are not the moral superiors of the audience. And the purpose of art is not as a socio-political and moral weapon, you evil bitches.
You good?
Yeah, go ahead.
Possible explanation for the different fan reactions towards Amber and Eve is how male characters like Mark are often seen as well developed for having flaws and given the benefit of moral ambiguity, while female characters like Amber are subjected to a black and white way of thinking. Okay, what the fuck are you talking? The fuck? Okay, I want to point out one female character that I really enjoy because of her moral ambiguity. Asajj Ventress from Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
Mm.
The fuck are you talking about black and white thinking? Okay, the issue that we have gone on ad nauseum with this fucking article already, even though we barely touched halfway. Well, no, we are halfway now, but is that she herself was written to have a very staunch, simplistic, and fucking asinine, selfish view of that relationship. She did not consider her partner's feelings. She made it all about herself, and she came off as very patronizing and very much a bitch.
Yeah. Also, characters like Mark are not viewed as complex flaws because first and foremost, Mark Grayson is not a John Constantine or Iron Man or Doctor Strange. Like he's not an asshole. He is closer in moral function to a Spider-Man or Superman-like character. His biggest flaw, if it can even be said to be one, is, and I know this is a trope, but he is literally too pure for the world of the story he's in. That is Mark's main flaw. His main flaw is his idealism, and his idealism coming back to bite him in the ass because he has such high standards for both the world and himself that it frequently bites him in the ass.
Yeah.
The fact that you can look at a character who's that much of a cinnamon roll and still consider them a flawed character.
Well, no, okay.
I know that I just explained that his naivete and his idealism are his flaws, but the way the author of the article just described it is as though Mark's flaws are equivalent to Amber's assholishness, as though Mark was a Tony Stark or Stephen Strange, and he's not. And if you can look at someone that that pure as driven snow and still call them a flawed character in the like Tony Stark sense, then your standards for men are stupidly high and your standards for women are fucking non-existent.
Okay. My computer was starting to glitch out there, so we might have to wrap it up after this article. So we might have to save the trailer for next week.
Yeah, that's fine.
Male viewers are often much more moralistic rather than empathetic when it comes to female characters failing to put themselves in the woman's shoes. Okay, that is a.
What did you just do to purer than driven snow puppy dog Mark Grayson? You just drew a moral equivalency between Amber being an outright cunt and Mark's flaw of being too pure for the world.
I'm sorry, I want to point out the phrasing of that. Moralistic rather than empathetic. No. Okay, I speak my okay, to be fair, I'm speaking of my own how I have viewed things. I empathize with a lot of characters. I don't agree with them. You know, there's a difference between empathizing and sympathizing, but I can understand things. I never look at it from a morality lens unless it's like, you know, well, that really depends on the
Unless morality is central to the character, and then obviously you have to, but
but empathy is a big thing when it comes to like characters because characters is a big thing to me. Man, because I am a writer myself and I write a bunch of characters and their stories and stuff, and I try to get into their headspace and all that. But besides the point is that's I would say on average, viewers mostly look at things from an empathetic lens when it comes to like stories and characters. It's just you wrote Amber was written to be an absolute, basically unrepentant. What's the word I'm thinking about? Conceive? No,
inconsiderate.
inconsiderate. Thank you, Don. Inconsiderate. I don't want to say spouse because they're not married. Partner.
Yeah, significant other.
Yeah, thank you. And I can't speak for myself because I've never been in a relationship, despite my best efforts. But that mentality there is something you can't really. It's hard to empathize with because it doesn't really seem to come from an actual, like, both logical or plausible mentality. If that makes sense.
And it's possible I might be projecting here because I'm very much used to this sort of gender war bullshit nonsense. But it really feels as though, in order to side with Amber as completely as they're doing here, they have to basically not consider Mark's feelings at all or actively demonize him like they seem to kind of be doing. And I'm sorry, but part of the reason everybody hates Amber is because, to call back to what I was saying earlier about his main flaw being he has such high standards for himself in the world that it kind of bites him on the ass. The fact that he is literally too pure for the world makes us want to see good things happen to and for him. Makes us want to see him succeed because he is so inherently good. It's very much the Superman thing. Unsurprisingly, considering that obviously Superman is a major influence on Invincible. But when a character is good to a white light purity and paragon degree, you want to see good things happen to and for them. To a lesser extent, this also happens with Spider-Man. So when a character like Mark, who is a giver to an almost pathological degree, he gives of himself at his own expense pretty much all the time, gets saddled with somebody like Amber, who seems to be a unidirectional taker of basically it's basically a situation where one character is a pathological giver and the other is a pathological taker. Naturally, this isn't going to be a sustainable relationship, but also it makes us feel bad on Mark's behalf because we want this poor boy to have good things happen to him. And instead of good things happening to him in the romantic realm, at least at first, obviously Eve is different. He's saddled with someone who will see his giving nature as a weakness to be exploited rather than something to be appreciated. And maybe I'm again projecting a little bit of myself here, but being as I am a gay guy, I can tell you that if I found myself somebody like Mark, I would be thanking my lucky stars and worshiping him every day, as Brainstorm and I recently talked about.
Yep.
But that's a different story
I?
for a different day. Lol.
Am I? Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
The hatred directed at Skylar of Breaking Bad follows a similar pattern. She's constantly condemned as controlling and nagging, stereotyped as Walter White's ball and chain wife. Skylar is seen as a folly to Walter's goals, yet her actions are grounded in clear morals as she reacts to a husband who lies, manipulates, and endangers their family. Meanwhile, Walter's transformation into a drug kingpin is romanticized and seen as compelling or even admirable to some fans. Viewers see Walter's flaws as good writing, framing them in a positive light, while Skylar's equally complex character is criticized without remorse. Okay, I mean, I'm gonna be honest.
I don't have a point of reference for Skylar from Breaking Bad. I have seen a few clips of Skylar from Breaking Bad, and she does seem like a rather stereotypical ball and chain. But I am willing to admit that I don't have enough context for her to explain that. But as for Walter, let me run through this in brief again. There's this thing called a likable or charming asshole.
That certainly has. That's Bryan Cranston.
Another great example, also from like prestige television, is the main character of House from House. Like, he is an asshole. There is no getting around that he is an asshole. Not to mention that every character he runs into, whether they be his friend or whether they be, the patient of the week, makes it very clear that he's an asshole. But he's also highly intelligent, highly engaging, very funny, very charming when he wants to be, very capable of smoothing and manipulating when he wants to, and so on and so on and so forth. That's what I mean. You can have male characters be an asshole, but unlike female characters who are assholes, the freedom to be an asshole does not absolve them of the responsibility to still be likable, charming, and engaging and entertaining characters. And even characters you're supposed to hate are characters you need to still be interested in and invest in. Like, a lot of people hate Homelander from The Boys. But for all that he is a bad guy and for all that a lot of people want to see him fail, he's still an interesting character, even regardless of the childhood trauma that make him somewhat sympathetic and make me personally want to save him. But yeah.
You can die trying.
Yeah, well, you have Azula, I have Homelander. These are
They are not the same.
they are not the same, but I think yours is worse. Cause Azula knows what she's doing is fucked up. Homelander mostly has the mind of a child and doesn't know any better most of the time. Like, he's driven by his emotions. Azula's defining trait is that she, last couple episodes notwithstanding, doesn't let her emotions impact her hardly at all, insofar as she has them. So in that vein, I would argue your "Hear Me Out" is worse than mine, but que sera.
I mean, speaking as someone who has constantly bottled his emotions and kept a constant state of stoicism for pretty much his whole life, I think I can understand. I think I have a good understanding of how she works.
Fair, but that doesn't change the fact that I will stand by the notion that your "Hear Me Out" is worse than mine. But back on point. The reason I brought up Homelander in the first place, even though Homelander is a villain, is a sociopathic asshole, childhood trauma notwithstanding, he's still entertaining. He's still charismatic. He still has a screen presence. He's still written well for the most part. The recent seasons are but that's just by the by. But yeah, just because a character's an asshole doesn't mean they're absolved of all responsibility to be an interesting character. Except when they're a female character, apparently, because if you complain about a female character not being engaging, or not being entertaining, or not being interesting either in general as a villain or in general as a, likable asshole type character, then you get called a misogynist. Which isn't to say there aren't interesting female characters and interesting female villains, even. Like for example, my roommate is taking the time to walk me through Game of Thrones for the first time. And I just earlier today got a handle on Cersei Lannister. That woman is a crazy bitch. But
It's worse than the books, I've heard.
yes, Cersei Lannister is a crazy bitch of the original vintage. But she's likable, she's engaging, she's physically pleasant occasionally, she can be charming, she can have emotional depth, which is something that also a lot of asshole female characters in this mode don't have. They have a resting stoicism to them that makes them utterly insufferable to have to deal with. Yeah, but when even someone as fucked in the head as Cersei Lannister can be an interesting character, I'm sorry, but no, it's not misogyny for me to hold female characters to the exact same standards of likability, intrigue, and interest that I hold male characters to.
Alright, Angel, I think both of you are going to die to your super I can fix them. Probably.
Yeah. I mean, we both understand they're the okay, hear me outs. That's we understand this, but yeah.
I mean, to be fair with Azula, it's not that bad. It's not a bad way to go.
And to be fair, getting bear hugged to death by Homelander is not a way that I.
Oh, you just okay. You did hugs. My mind went place somewhere else. Okay.
Well, yeah, I know, but if I ended up getting bear hugged to death, I wouldn't necessarily mind it from Homelander. Hell, I'd probably still be saying I loved you with my dying breath if he like bear hugged me to death.
Okay. Fucking Christ. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I'm getting a fucking headache, and I am feeling my body starting to shut down. So
Yeah, we can call it.
I don't.
Didn't you say you have Monday off?
I do. I have to go to bed pretty early for work on Tuesday, but
Well, we could try something tomorrow.
I got the movie. Remember?
Oh wait, shit. Yeah, fuck.
Yeah. So like, we'll just play catch up on next Saturday, folks. I apologize for ending this abruptly. I'm just.
He needs to go and be unconscious. And my roommate, I'm pretty sure, grabbed me donuts, so I'm going to go and gorge on those.
Yeah. So
when we're done.
with that, folks, I want to say goodbye. Adios. Aloha. Avidazai. Sayonara. Peace. Cheers. And
Shalom and fuck off. Be nice to your mom.